Uncommon is a production by Neuralle, a full-service digital agency. If you want to grow with a premium agency and have the ability to work with Jordan directly, then learn more at neuralle.com/media and request a callback. That's neuralle.com/media.
My name's Jordan Michaelides and I'm the host of Uncommon, a show that asks the why on business, media, current affairs and sport. This Uncommon Corona editions sees us catching up with prior guests that have been on the show to document how they're actually adapting to this once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, I guess you could call it. If you like the episode, of course, please do subscribe on YouTube. Hit that like button. It helps us, of course, with the algorithm. Show notes for all guests, including previous ones, can be found at neuralle.com/uncommon. For audio, if you want to listen on podcasts, just search Uncommon on all your good podcast apps. And for social, to keep up to date behind the scenes, search at @uncommon_show. With that all being said, thanks for tuning in and let's get into the episode. My guests this week, two guests in this case, James Harrisson, who we've had on before, host of the Self-Named podcast, and his good mate, Sunny Gosal. Is it Gosal?
Yep.
Author of the Bushido Code and e-commerce entrepreneur, and apparently our first international guest. Sunny, I've got to say thanks for the notes on James. Very helpful for his interview. Actually, you know what? I want to ask you this even before we got on air. I read the other day that there's this thing in Canada called heart attack snow. Is this true?
Heart attack snow?
Yeah. It's just... this is the shit I get down to on Reddit.
I'm curious what that is.
Okay, so apparently there's a type of slushy snow that is prone for giving people, let's say they're probably, I don't know if it's anyone or people in their elderly age who shovel this type of snow with this condensed cold air often creates like the perfect environment for a heart attack.
I don't know, man. I mean, that sounds like the perfect environment to like slip and break your hip.
Really?
I don't know about like heart attacks. Here's the thing. Even though I live in Canada, I live in Vancouver, Canada. So when people think of like the
it's not Alberta.
It's not Alberta. It's not Toronto in the winter, right? We, out of the whole country, we have the nicest, warmest weather pretty much, right? So snow here is fairly rare. And it's extremely rare to have a lot of snow to the point where there's tons of slush on the street.
Heart attack snow, that sounds like when Americans think we walk around with kangaroos every day. It's like an international perception.
Well, so that's what I was trying to think is like, is this just because people that are doing it on average are older, they're unhealthy? Or is there actually something there chemically going on in the environment? So most people seem to believe it's because the air is constricted and because you're shoveling really heavy, it's a heavier type of snow and you're using your upper body more. It increases both your blood pressure and your heart rate at the same time, which is supposedly the perfect environment for a heart attack. But I was just reading it and going, really? Like, you're going to have a heart attack if you're healthy? Doesn't make any sense.
Well, I can say from experience, shoveling slush, wet snow is extremely heavy. Snow is fairly light, but even if you take snow and you compact it, it becomes extremely heavy. Now add water to that mixture, and you're literally like, how heavy is a bucket of water? It's very heavy. For the average person who's, especially we're talking about elderly here, right? You're literally shoveling buckets of water. So I can see that. It's a lot of strain on the body, especially for someone who isn't normally active and has to now go out and shovel their way out so they can go get groceries or whatever. So I can actually see that kind of being the perfect storm for a heart attack now that you mention it. I mean, it does make some sense.
So when's James coming to Canada? James?
Well, I was planning on going this year, actually.
I know, right?
A bit of a Northern Hemisphere tour to escape the winter, but obviously that's not happening anymore. So
no,
let's see, man. Got bookmarked it for 2021 potentially. Got more time to get some points for the business class ticket.
Yeah, I spoke to Steve Huey last week, who I know you had on.
Yeah.
it's really hard for him to pick when flights are going to go back to sort of near what they were.
Yeah.
I guess there's so many questions about coronavirus that I have for each guest, but I guess maybe we should get everyone's read on it so far. We'll start with James and go around to Sunny.
Read in terms of the current situation.
What's your mindset like right now? You know, we spoke about the fact that you guys had your call published this week. It's about 5 weeks old, so it's an interesting time capsule. I want to get a sense of where your mind's at right now in comparison to that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like this whole period has been a really good opportunity to practice stoicism, which is something that I read and study a lot. I'm guessing you would be aware of that, Jordan.
Yeah.
And one of the main things they talk about is, I guess remaining calm in the face of chaos, and also understanding the difference between something you can control and something you can't. And so I have used this opportunity to, I stay informed, I stay aware of what's going on as much as I can. Like, you provided some very good links at the start of this whole thing, which I keep an eye on daily. But, it's like, check the stats every day, check the latest from the World Health Organization, from the government. But then once you've done that, don't spend the whole day watching the news. Just put your head down, keep executing on projects, business as usual. And for the most part, it really has been that. So my mindset is really good now. I feel like, here in Australia, we're pretty lucky. I feel like we basically are on the tail end of the whole thing. So, past few months have been actually fine for me personally in terms of like my mindset. I've just used it as an opportunity to actually kind of slow down and be a bit more reflective, I guess, of what I'm doing and the directions I'm going, which has kind of been almost good in a way. So obviously a lot of bad that's come from this, but my mindset is pretty good considering.
Yeah. What about you, Sunny?
Yeah, somewhat similar. I've had, I tried to use this time to kind of clear my mind, put pen to paper, figure out what's working, what's not working, both kind of just in my personal life and my business life. And there's been a lot less distraction. So that's been nice for me. Just because without distraction, I can think clearer longer, if that makes any sense. I can kind of just like let an idea marinate, or just like, have thoughts and be with them for a minute before I get, sidetracked by something else that's happening in the day, or somewhere I have to go, because I don't have to do that. I'm literally at home. And there's this powerful thing about having the entire 24 hours of the day at your disposal for you to use as you see fit. And so I try to utilize that as much. So to give you an example, like my schedule kind of went out of whack these last 2 months. I was going to bed at like 2, 3, sometimes 4 a.m., waking up at noon, waking up even later sometimes. And normally I would have tons of guilt for this, right? Because we're told, and we're kind of, we've been told that wake up in the morning, wake up at 5, get some stuff done, hit the gym at 6 a.m., blah, blah, blah. Like, that's like the productivity guide, right? Like productivity 101, if you want to get stuff done. So my whole day spiraled out of control. But at the same time, I was way more productive, way more creative, and there was no guilt, right? Normally there would be a lot of guilt associated with waking up a little later and or going to sleep really late. But now that these 24 hours were mine to use exactly how I wanted, without any distraction, I found a certain kind of flow from that, and I actually really enjoyed being kind of in self-isolation. I wouldn't say really enjoyed, right? There was definitely times where I was like, man, I wish I could go out. I wish I could go see my friends, do whatever, right? But it was advantageous to me in a certain way. And I took advantage of that time the best way I knew how.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking about this recently. I think it's the fact that we all need social contact with fellow humans, right? We all do it. You think about your weekend. Ordinarily, like a Friday night will be more chilled. Sometimes we'll have people over for drinks. Saturday night, probably definitely doing something. And Sunday, absolutely nothing generally. But there's also the potential to be catching up with people who can't do the other days. And so that sort of breaks up your week. But I noticed that if I had, like during this lockdown time, I had just purely been able to focus on doing whatever the fuck I want. And I think you're right. I think it's actually been amazing at home. We've completely changed things that we've wanted to change for a very, very long time. Like little stuff, like cleaning out stuff. We've sold so much shit on Facebook Marketplace. It's unbelievable, actually. There's so many things, James, that's changed at this house that you've been to. Like couches are gone. We've had like these hand-me-down couches from my parents for like at least 5 years, and they're probably like 30 plus years old. And just improving little things like that has made this place feel a bit more like home, which has been really good for productivity and just getting so much shit done. I think I've been saying to most guests on this podcast that when all this sort of kicked off around February, we were making like no new sales. We're running all these Google ads. Like we're spending like $1,000 a week on Google ads and no leads are coming in whatsoever for the agency. And so we said, okay, fuck it. Let's not spend any of that money and just compress all the goals that we had for the next 6 months and just do it all. And we're pretty much there.
It's amazing.
So that's been, I'd agree with that. The productivity element has been massive.
Yeah.
Do you get, James, are you going to get, because we've got these, Sunny, I don't know if he's mentioned, we've got like this cash flow boost, which is coming for businesses here. And then you've got Job Seeker and Job Keeper. Do you qualify for any of that?
To be honest, man, I haven't even really looked into it. And I kind of the reason for that is because, like I said before, it's kind of been business as usual, which is a combination of luck and preparation, I guess. There's a bit of both. And I guess some people might think this is a stupid thing to do or whatever, but I don't like necessarily getting into that mindset of, I'd rather put my energy into actually continuing to grow what's already working and keep working on that and put all my energy into that rather than trying to, take advantage of any sort of welfare, I guess. So I don't think it's good or bad, but that's kind of where my mindset's been at. So I haven't received any of that. Have you got much of that?
Well, we just qualified for the Job Keeper, which has been
awesome.
Very, very, very handy. But it's really weird because we qualified for it in the first month. So revenue is down like 40, 50%, obviously, as an agency. But then we just pivoted what we were doing. We launched a bunch of new landing pages for things that we were already offering to clients, but we'd not really advertised about it. So web design, paid media services, and a bunch of other stuff. And now we don't qualify for it at all. Like I think next month we'll do like 4 times the revenue we did last month, which is ridiculous. The website design stuff is crazy. But the thing is, it's really weird because once you qualify for it, you can't exit the program. You have to go for it for the full term, which is really odd.
And what does that mean exactly?
It just means that you continue to receive the Job Keeper thing, and you have to like
works out well for you.
It does. It was very handy at the time, and I thought we probably need it because video work went to zero.
Yeah.
But it's been really interesting because there's a lot of people who just in the industry shut down shop. I don't know if they laid off staff, but they put them on like compulsory leave. And I think they've lost a lot of market share because of it, which has been really, really interesting. So we'll see what happens over the next few months.
Yeah. I mean, it's great that I think that's one thing this has really highlighted is that, the opportunities are still there if you're willing to be adaptable with what you're doing. Because of course, people, even for yourself, if you had continued on the same path that you were before all this, there would have been huge roadblocks for you. And so that's, I think, what a lot of people did. They saw that their original plans weren't going to work, so they've kind of put things on hold or paused it. Whereas the people who have pivoted and adapted, as you have, are actually thriving in this period, which I think is amazing.
I think It's been interesting. I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like humans are remarkably, once they get through that sort of denial phase of what's happening, they're actually able to deal with a lot of issues as they come. Like I've just noticed visiting local cafes. I mean, I don't know how heavy the lockdown is in Canada, Sunny, but you know, we've still been able to visit cafes and stuff like that and pick up stuff for takeaway. And that's been really interesting because people just sort of like, oh, well, we just got to sort of proceed on, right? What's the alternative? To sit and cry about it. What's it been like in Canada in that regard?
So all non-essential businesses were shut down. So cafes, etc. You weren't allowed to go in to sit down. Obviously, you could order and pick up on street side surface. Things like pharmacies and home hardware stores, those types of shops were open, grocery stores, but nothing like, you couldn't go in and try on jackets at a clothing store or anything like that.
No.
So all non-essential stuff was shut down.
Yeah.
And now, though, we're starting to see it all open up. So now we have some restaurants that are allowing seating, and it's 50% capacity, kind of how it was when we got into this whole thing. They actually they didn't just cut it cold turkey. They just went, they kind of said, okay, we need to have stricter measures within restaurants. Every other table should be empty. And then they shut down, then there was 100% strict rules. No one could eat in the restaurant. And now we're back at the every other table should be empty with certain other rules in place also.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about retail. Like, holy fuck, the amount of so we created an e-commerce service because we already had quite a few e-commerce businesses, and that shit was just, that went crazy.
Oh, like, dude, 100%. I got so many emails and calls and text messages, like just hilarious ones, like, "Hey man, what do you know about e-commerce?" Like, I remember getting that message once and like laughing, like,
"Oh, this
like,
actually reminds me." This reminds me of when James went to like the barber or something and he told her what he does. Like, "Oh, I run an e-commerce store," or "I'm in e-commerce." And she's like, "What was that?" Now you'll be able to explain it. It's like, now it's like, it's like, yeah, that e-commerce is the thing where you can buy shit online during a pandemic.
That's it, man. Yeah, a lot of people know what that word means now.
Oh, fuck. I feel like the search term for e-commerce went up like 80% in the month of February, apparently.
Wow.
Which is interesting.
80%?
Yeah, like on top of what it was.
I wouldn't be
like
surprised if it went up 800. I wouldn't be surprised if it went up like 800%.
Yeah.
Because like, I'm not joking. I get messages and stuff every now and then about e-commerce, right? But the first like month or so, it was like just people I didn't even remember. People just coming out of nowhere, messaging me, asking me about e-commerce, because that was at one point in time when there was a complete lockdown. We don't know how long it was going to be, right? It was like, now we're at least seeing kind of the light at the end of the tunnel. But 2 months ago, we had no idea how long this tunnel was, how long we were going to be in the situation. So people were like, what can I do from home? Okay, I've got my computer, e-commerce, right? But the thing with e-commerce is it's not an overnight type of thing. It's something that takes, you can set up a website within overnight. You absolutely can. But all the other components that go into it take time, effort, resources, long journey.
Yeah, I think that's been an interesting thing. Like, we had a lot of queries from small businesses, and you could sort of tell that they were just fishing around to see how much it would cost them. And you quote someone like $1,000 on like a tiny, quick Shopify setup or something like that, and they'd be like surprised. And then you'd have to tell them, well, you're going to have to do all this other stuff. And so you just say to them, like, look, don't worry about it. You're just going to have to go set up this, and this, and come back when you're ready. But it's weird because a lot of these businesses would have gone from, and this is a weird thing probably for us because we all work in businesses where you're working on the business, if that makes sense. Like, most of our time, I would say, like, I know, James, you'd be handling customer queries, but you're still spending time on things like marketing, supply chain, and other stuff like that. It's very different to retail, where you're just 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 or 11 to 7, you're in the store, and then you're having to do all the other shit on top of that. It's I would sort of see it as like a really freeing moment for someone who is running a retail store, if they can survive it. Now,
if they can see what you see, right? So, for instance, if someone's working in a brick and mortar store and then the store shuts down, all of a sudden there's panic. How do I sell my whatever I'm selling, right? Let's say they weave baskets, right? And they sell these baskets at their store. Now the store shuts down and they have 0 customers. They went from all these customers to literally 0. Now, if someone hired you to open up a store for them for $1,000, that is actually that's an investment. Because I'm sure their rent is probably $1,000 or more. I don't know, depending on where you're at. But $1,000 seems fairly low for rent for a store, right? But here's the thing. This store is open 24 hours a day. This store can be automated, right? This store doesn't require you to be sitting inside a box for 12 hours a day. Yeah. So just what you get out of that, what it is a limitation to seeing how big you can make your store, right? Because if you're just that little corner shop in town and you're used to having 15, 20 people come through your store a day, small numbers, maybe closing 2, 3, 5, I don't know, right? It's hard sometimes to see, wait a second, what if we times that number by 100, right? It's just like what it is your perception, your ability to see what that $1,000 store can do for you.
And that's the hardest part of the sell. And for some people, they just can't see that. Now, speaking of stores, how we were speaking about our business and how much has changed in the last few months in particular. How's the pants game, boys?
Yeah, man, the pants game has been fairly good for us, all things considering. We've had a bunch of things that are kind of working against us, right? Like we have a lockdown where people literally can't leave their houses, right? They're not supposed to. We, at the time, and still even right now, we were selling winter pants when it was not winter. Our flagship product of pants is a fleece-lined waterproof winter pant. And so now we're pretty much into summer now, right? We definitely were all through the thick of spring, still selling winter pants. But because of the way that the whole the lockdown, what the lockdown did to e-commerce, we were still getting and we still are getting reasonable ad costs, and people are still buying our product because people are hiking, people are going out to enjoy nature instead of doing whatever they were doing before, right? They have the time now. So we lucked out in a way.
Yeah, that's interesting. Did you guys, because I remember at some point, James and I were talking about, that's when I sent you that info. I think it's covid19.info.
COVID Live.
COVID19 live.info. By the way, I was looking at that when we first, COVID19 info.live, sorry. I've referenced this so many times. And I remember we were, this is what we were first looking at. And this is actually before it really kicked off in Australia. And I stopped looking at this a while ago. It's actually interesting seeing it now. Canada, 88,000. Man, Brazil's catching up to the US pretty fast. Yeah, I remember they were saying around like the supply chain issues. There's so many businesses in the e-commerce space that we knew that had issues getting product out of China. And then now they're sort of back, not normal, but they're like back to 50% capacity manufacturing. Have you guys used this time to think about new products at all?
It's a great question. We've used this time to think about, because it has exposed some potential weak links. But this is something that we actually had a long discussion about, Sunny and I and Nav as well, about, where we are manufacturing our products, where we're shipping them from, looking at trends of what's happening there. Because one thing I think this pandemic has done is that it hasn't necessarily changed anything. It's kind of just accelerated or exposed things that were already going to happen, or accelerated the rate that they are happening. And I think in terms of manufacturing, like we see that it is starting to, people are reassessing China for a lot of manufacturing for a number of reasons. Wages are going up, things aren't as cheap anymore. There's geopolitical issues like tariffs, all this stuff. And so that is definitely something that we are considering now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think the world is realizing that, like, it was crazy. Like, all these countries needed personal protective gear, and they were all out, and the only place that they could get it from was China. Right?
Yeah.
Like, and then you have like medicine, like India and China make the majority of the United States medicine, right? When it comes to pharmaceuticals. And so people weren't getting their medicine. And there is, this kind of notion coming back in the United States of like, we need to be self-sufficient. I live up here in Canada, and I visit the United States often, but it's a different vibe. As soon as you cross the border, even though we're connected, there's a different energy. And down there,
totally different.
Right? Like it's strange. It's sometimes hard for me to explain that, but there definitely is. And down there, like, people are saying, okay, we need to bring our manufacturing back to the United States. We need to be able to make all this stuff back in the United States. So the world is waking up to, we cannot rely on China, right? And even more so when you start digging into that, in the conversation that James is mentioning, we started looking at numbers like, okay, if we do manufacture stuff in China, how much does it cost? What's the quality like? And where else can we manufacture? And it used to be like in the 90s and the early 2000s, and even current day, when you think of making something, you think of China. And China back in the day was not necessarily associated with quality goods, right? Because they were just getting started with all this manufacturing stuff. So you can't really blame them, right? And so now, like, you can get some really high quality stuff out of China. You just gotta put the effort to find it. The thing is, what do you want to buy? Do you want to buy the super high quality stuff, or do you want to buy the cheap stuff? They'll sell both. They'll sell whatever you want to buy, basically, right? So what's happened is that you can now start getting higher quality stuff in China, but now there's other countries like Vietnam, like Bangladesh, the Philippines, that are now doing manufacturing also. So you can actually now diversify where you get your products manufactured, and there'll be pros and cons there.
Yeah,
right?
it's very interesting to me because let's look at the North American bloc, because Trump and I guess the other leaders within that zone recently signed I guess a new trade deal which has made Mexico, America, Canada a trading bloc in and of itself, which has been very, very interesting. And I wonder whether, they talk about bringing jobs back to America. I wonder whether that over time will be a split supply chain over those three countries. So maybe lower wage capacity jobs would be held in somewhere like Mexico, and maybe more tech-driven jobs that don't require chips would be in Canada or Silicon Valley or something like that. I guess we'll see what that looks like, but I can see how a lot of that would be brought back stateside to North America. It's interesting for Australia. I was going to say to James, yesterday, how's this for doing exercise? I don't know if you guys listen to music, but I was listening to our Prime Minister talk at the National Press Club while doing my exercise yesterday. And I thought it was very interesting because, so we're in this weird stage where, Canada and Australia's economies are really similar. The only difference is that Canada is bigger. Like the economy is bigger. the population's bigger, all these little things that make up the difference. And actually, I think if you look at the landmass, Canada's just got as much areas that you can't live that Australia has, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of, and the background being part of the Commonwealth nations, politically very, very similar. And they've both been attacked by China because they want to know what happened. But they're also both market economies because, I mean, in Canada and Australia, a lot of our economies are driven by commodities. So I think in Canada, they make mainly potash, which is like a type of fertilizer and chemical. There's something that they mine in Canada. I just can't remember what it was, if it was coal or something else. Oil is obviously big in Canada, or bigger than it is in Australia. And then over here, we've got ore, cattle, and things like barley. And I was listening to this speech, and they're saying that, like, the Australian government's saying that, okay, we're still going to go ahead with this market economy thing. We're not going to look at tariffs. We're still going to go ahead with free trade and all that sort of stuff. And I just wonder where that leaves us. You know, do countries like Canada and Australia continue going down the free trade route, and it just means that we move to other countries like Vietnam and the Philippines and so forth? Or do we look at bringing more manufacturing home? I don't know. What do you guys think about all that?
It's a big question.
It is.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. One thing, I guess for me, I don't try to predict the future too much. I just observe what it is and then adapt accordingly. So I don't think I have a well enough informed opinion to be able to be a soothsayer on that, but I will be watching it closely and making decisions accordingly.
Yeah. What about you, Sunny?
I'm the same. I don't really I'm not if I tried to predict it, I'd probably be wrong.
Yeah.
But that's just my track record. So I would be much like James, just kind of observe and react accordingly. Right? But what I can say is, from my own perspective, like, we're thinking, like, what do we do, right, with Northbound Gear? Do we continue manufacturing in China? Do we try a little stint with one product or a line of products in the Philippines or Vietnam or Bangladesh? Do we try it here in Vancouver? Because we can do it here, right? It's going to be way more expensive, but we can definitely do it here. Will we be able to make it here? And then we're going to have to raise the price on some of our products for sure, but hopefully the quality would be better. Hopefully the environmental impact will be a lot less severe. And so these are all things that we need to think about. And these are all things that we are now thinking about. Right? Because as you grow a company, and as we've been growing Northbound Gear, we've been asking ourselves, what is our ethos? What are we following here? What do we want to do? What is some of the things that are important to us, our values? And based on those questions, we're able to select things like where are we going to manufacture our stuff. But as a small business owner, I can say from my perspective, we're contemplating all the options locally, staying in China, and trying a new open market such as Vietnam or Bangladesh.
It's very interesting, the reference to Vietnam, because that's something that's been spoken about a lot in Australia recently. I think I've read in the Financial Review, James, that the government, just before all this kicked off, the government, along with like the biggest supply chain based corporations, so you can imagine Rio Tinto, BHP, West Farmers, and a bunch of others. I think it was 20 or 30 companies went over for a conference with the Prime Minister's office and the Treasurer. Like, it was huge. And no one spoke about it. It was only reported once in the AFR. And I'm like, what the fuck? This is like the Treasurer, the Prime Minister, the Trade Minister, all going to Vietnam with these huge companies and CEOs in Australia. And I can see that Vietnam is what is on Australia's eye. And it had me thinking, like, how do you find sourcing that sort of stuff now? Because that was the thing in China, right? Like, in the early years, it was about discovery, finding those good manufacturers And then things like Alibaba came along and it made that whole process a lot easier. But I don't know if that really exists in Vietnam, and maybe we're in that next stage.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's something that I've been looking at in terms of how would that work. And, I've spoken to a few sourcing agents, and that's basically what they do. They find manufacturers based on what you want. Mm-hmm. And, previously there was a heavy focus in China for obvious reasons, but a few that I've been speaking to recently, they have offices in India, in Vietnam, in Mexico, and all these other places that are kind of emerging manufacturing hubs. So I think that it's still early in terms of any sort of transition or their growth, I guess, but there's enough there and there's enough potential where people who do this for a living, find manufacturers, are taking it more seriously. So that's sort of what I've observed recently.
Interesting. I want to jump to podcasting quickly, James.
Sure.
I've noticed that the James Harrisson podcast has become the James and Sunny Show during all this. Yes. How have you found? Because you spoke to me about doing remote, and then I think this week you asked me about when are we going to start doing in-person stuff. So we're thinking late June, probably early July. That's at least when we started booking. The problem is that who knows? We could be in another lockdown in a month, so you just got to sort of play it by ear. But how have you found the changes?
Yeah, it's a good question, man. It's funny because when I actually started doing podcasting about a year and a half ago now, I only did remote ones initially. So all my interviews initially were via Zoom. When I interviewed you, that was via Zoom. And then it was only actually recently that I started doing them in person. And what part of that was, I guess, inspired by what I saw you built as well, and how powerful that is when you have an in-person guest. And, not only for the actual conversation and for the content, but for that relationship ongoing after the interview. Because it's funny, man, I've done some interviews in the past remotely where, you reach out to a guest, you book a time, you put a lot of work and effort into doing an interview. It's a great interview. You have the call, but then you hang up and you basically never speak to that person again.
Yeah, it dissipates completely.
And so, but that doesn't really happen when you meet someone in person. You have that sort of face-to-face connection. So in terms of that, I was really seeing the power of doing in person, and I was really starting to go harder on that. But then, of course, that hasn't been possible the past few months. But so in terms of how I'm thinking about it, I've been doing less interviews, but I've really started to get the itch again to start doing it. And I think that's something important as well, because I was speaking to another friend who has a podcast, and I know one thing we talked about, Jordan, when I interviewed you, was the dreaded pod fade, when people, sort of stop doing.
Was this friend Rohit?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I knew it.
So he put his podcast on pause after 100 or so episodes.
Yeah.
And then he's just recently come back. And I was talking to him about
with the former Prime Minister, by the way.
Yeah, I saw that. Pretty amazing. And so I saw how he had approached that. And, I think that's right, that a lot of the time when, you put something on hold or you step away from it, it kind of does end up fading away into nothing. But one thing he said was, take a 10-year time horizon with this project. So what do you need to do to make sure that you're still doing this in 10 years? And yes, I can do this. I can go hard on it and do a weekly interview for a year, which is basically what I did. And I loved it and it was great. But it was starting to get to that point of, it was a little bit of burnout maybe.
Yeah.
And so I think it's okay to kind of step away from that for a few months, re-energize, and that's what's going to allow me to continue to do this for another 9 years.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think during the coronavirus, all the guests that we've interviewed have been on before. So I don't need to do a lot of background research. Like I think I've spent probably spent half an hour, maybe to an hour for the notes for our episode, and just listen back to, because I've been listening to your calls, just listen back to the most recent one. And I'd agree. I think it's like really this period of time has actually been really helpful because I've used that time to do other things, which will make sure that when we go harder on this, it'll come out better. Like I've spent so much time on getting this fucking technical setup right so that we can do these international interviews and still have a quality setup. So now I've just got to execute on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree. Like it gets very, very draining. And
that's
the
the thing,
hardest
like
bit is starting again.
That is true. And I think because all three of us, we are sort of type A personalities where we are very driven and want to go hard on things and execute. And I think that's another thing I'm kind of grateful for this period of lockdown where, it's actually, I find it very hard to slow down if I'm not forced to, it's something that's very difficult for me to do. And this has actually forced me to do that in a way. I spend more time. I've been getting the best sleeps of my life. I've been sleeping in until I wake up without alarms. I've been exercising more, doing like 2-hour workouts. I've been meditating more. And it's good to have that reset, I think, especially for people who are like very driven and type A most of the time.
Yeah. Why do you think we get like that? I've always wondered, like, because I don't think this is like a question around contentment, right? Like when you're a type A individual, I don't think you're ever really content. Like it's so my birthday was the other day, and on the weekend we bought. I've gotten really into bonsai recently, Sunny. So I've now got like 6 or 7 plants.
That's your last one is so sexy. I love bonsai trees. And yeah, like they have that. They're minimalist, but they're just busy enough that that tree is gorgeous.
So now, you should see them now. So I've got like a 30-year-old maple now, a trident maple. That was I found probably, James, by the way, the best nursery in Australia. This guy down in Mornington, he keeps his address secret because he's sort of amongst the collectors in Australia, and he's been robbed in the past, which is really interesting at a previous location. Yeah, he's got like 50. He's got a 300-year-old ficus. Like, I'm not even kidding. Yeah, it's absolutely fucking ridiculous. And then he's got
I'm trying to picture the thief who plans to rob a bonsai tree store and then sell bonsai trees to make the profit. Like, who is that? Who is that person?
It's someone who's in the industry. They have to be. And they have to be selling it to a collector. So what I learned, here's an interesting thing that I've thought about recently is there's got to be something done around bonsai. Bonsai is in a similar stage to what watches was about 10 years ago. I don't know if you guys know Watchville, or Kevin Rose created Watchville, and then Hodinkee came around. And that really opened up watches to a lot of young men. And prior to that, it was just all about collectors and snobs. And that's sort of where bonsai is, except it's actually more achievable than watches because you can make your entrance into it at $40, $50 and still buy a really good tree and do it up, and a couple of years later it could be worth $200. So I'm just playing around with that at the moment. It's endless fun. I spent 4 hours yesterday repotting and trimming back some stuff.
What do you like about it? I'm curious.
So there's a few things that I said to the guy when I met him on Saturday. You can't use your phone. You have to be fully focused on doing what you're doing. You can spend hours on it. It keeps you outside. You're moving. And you can also passively think and do stuff. So I listened to 3 podcasts yesterday, and just sat and thought about things for quite a while. So it was the best, man. So much fun. and also as a type A individual, because I really like junipers. I don't know if you guys know junipers. They're really shrubby and they grow a lot of stuff. So you can trim them twice a year. And so it's just hours of just like trimming these things. I don't know what it is, but there's something about having it just right for that brief moment is just the best.
So with the bonsai, I'm just curious because there's not too much going on. I guess there is if you really do think about it. But you're snipping here and there. Is it like you contemplate the snip for 5, 10, 15 minutes? Like, and then you sit back?
It's different stages. Like, okay, let's say if you got young trees, middle-aged trees, and older trees. So older trees, you might trim them every 2 years, and you might wire them every couple years. And so they're just generally there. They're beautiful trees, and they don't need that much work done to them until they start really, really growing. And most of the time they're pot bound. So if you pulled them out of the pot, the entire mass underneath them is just all root. Like, it's actually crazy how it's like a slab of root. It's quite amazing. Younger trees, which I bought a couple from this guy, they get grown in the ground in like a plastic pot. So because of the fact that they can grow past the pot and into the ground, they grow this root mass really quickly, and they get that but they're stuck in the pot. So they get that real stunted look real quick, and you can grow them really quickly. And so they're pre or young bonsai, and they still need to be wired. And so I bought like a couple of those, bought one for $20, $40, and they were just like left just round the corner in like this muddy section. One of them actually had like tree rot. And like after sprucing it up, I reckon it could be like a $400 tree. But so you get that, and then you sit it down, and you look at like the shape of the tree, and you sort of just decide on like what's the style that you're going to do with this thing. And there's where you set the style. So you've got to trim it up, and you just see where the tree is moving. You don't actually have to aggressively define how this style is going to look. You might maneuver with some wiring a little bit so that the branch is not going down, but it's going a little bit more up. But most of the time, it's actually just looking at what the tree is doing naturally and just helping it grow in that direction. So it's just like I don't know. It's like you're cleaning something to make it look better and older, if that makes sense. You get like I said, the other tree that I found that had like a bit of tree rot on it. It was already a bonsai, so it was already in a bonsai pot, and it had clearly been wired. And it was sort of like a windswept style. And that thing could be worth like $400 within a couple of months if I can fix it up right. But this guy just left it because his nursery is so big. Like I remember walking around and there was trees that were just on their side because like some wind had come through that week, and he hadn't had time to look at it.
Flipping trees. Cool.
Yeah, flipping trees. But
I just find that whole thing really fascinating. The idea of flipping trees, but also bonsai, like, and how bonsai is kind of it's a Japanese practice, right? Bonsai, the word is Japanese. Mm-hmm. You said making it look old, which is really fascinating because how much stuff do you want to look old? Not like maybe if you're aging like leather or something to that effect, but it made me think of the art form that again is Japanese. That is I forget the exact word, but I think it's like kinsori or something like that. Where
wabi sabi.
Which is it?
Wabi sabi.
I think it starts with a K, but it's basically where when a bowl or something breaks, you put it back together with gold. Yeah.
I know the exact thing you're talking about. It's not wabi sabi, but it's a similar ethos. It's like that was fucking fascinating because me and my partner, we've been to Japan quite a lot. She loves it just as much as I do, and they have this. Yeah, they sort of just take things naturally as they are and just appreciate it. Like a lot of Japanese cultural things are just moving and perfecting something that already exists. Wabi sabi is an interesting one because it's sort of like just leave things as they are naturally and improve them over time is sort of what the mindset is around. But when you go to Japan, in rural Japan, all the the wires, like the telephone wires or the electricity wires. When we were driving down this sort of like it's not a highway, but it's like a rural road, but it's still a big passageway, and the entirety of the lines were covered with spider webs. Like, I'm talking gigantic. And because they have this view that they just leave it.
So interesting.
Like, what spider webs are fucking everywhere in Japan. Like, I'm not even kidding. It's strange because, like, you'll be in this beautifully clean place and then up in the corner there's just a spider web. It's like, what the fuck?
So the mentality is just to never disturb what's naturally there.
Just to leave it naturally as it is.
I mean, spiders have a huge benefit. Right?
Oh, yeah.
They clean up all the smaller critters.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that's why you never see any bugs. Bugs in these apartments or like rural places. But yeah, there's something so nice about it because James, you've seen the balcony we've got here, and I just stand out there for hours doing it. You get a lot of sun too. That's another thing. I've been reading a lot about like COVID-19, how they believe why a lot of people get these serious implications at a younger age is vitamin D deficiency.
I believe it.
Yeah. Apparently,
dude, I've just been on the sunny days. I've been sitting outside in the sun for like 2 hours just reading.
Yeah. Yeah. Apparently that though won't even do it. Apparently the most of the vitamin D we get is through our diet. So you need to eat more stuff that contains vitamin D or boost vitamin D, or you take drops or something else. I watched a really interesting episode with Rhonda Patrick on Joe Rogan, and she's actually saying that vitamin D is not just a vitamin, it's a hormone. It actually really changes the hormones in your bodies and modulates like serotonin and melatonin quite a lot.
I believe it.
So that's very interesting. Sunny, have you thought about bonsai? Like doing it yourself?
You seem like a bonsai kind of guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. My background in design really makes me appreciate certain design styles, and I love, like, you see it almost cliche where you see this minimalist interior, and then there's like a beautiful bonsai in the middle, or above the fireplace or whatever, and so that is my aesthetic, and so I love it. I definitely aspire to have some bonsais, but I have heard that they're expensive, and I don't think I have space for one right now. I just got into plants, literally just got into plants. So I'm going to start with some just regular plants before I go bonsai.
Yeah, they're not cheap. I mean, that maple we bought was like $400, but it's also 30 years old. So it's actually older than I am, I think. And yeah, some of these trees are really fucking old. I remember this guy was telling me that you can get this thing called Yamadori, which is like trees that have had stunted growth often on the side of a highway because there's a lot of gravel. And he like dug it up, turned it into a bonsai, and 2 years later he sold it for like $8,000. It's just ridiculous. What hobbies have you guys picked up during this period?
I don't think I've actually picked up any, but I've accelerated ones that I was already doing. Hobbies I've lost, which is another question, but that I was bummed out about was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and salsa dancing.
Yeah.
And they're probably the two last things that will reopen, which is annoying. But I've always meditated, I've always read, I've always worked out, and I've basically just doubled the time that I spend doing those things now.
Yeah. The salsa dancing, where was that?
There's a place in Richmond.
Okay.
It would have been pretty close to you, actually, just on Bridge Road towards Hoddle Street.
That would have been
just
fun.
A dance studio.
That's what
it's
I
so
would
fun,
do.
man.
If I was a single guy, I would be doing dance classes for sure.
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
I always say that's, like what better way, you can go to a club or something and you can do that, or you can just go to a salsa dancing class and you dance with 10 other people. Not that that's the main reason to do it, but it's a side benefit.
But you're more inclined to meet someone that you would have similar personality traits or attributes to, I think, rather than at some meat factory like a like a nightclub. I've always wondered that. Like, why, if you're a single dude, why go to nightclubs? It's like the worst marketing opportunity ever.
100%. I agree. Yeah.
What about you, Sunny? What have you been doing hobby wise?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a hobby, but like you, I definitely took time to kind of detox and declutter my home. And being a designer, I kind of did a few things where I made it more my own. Plants was one of them.
Bikes on the
lighting. Wall. Pardon me?
Bikes on the wall.
Yeah, no plants. Not yet.
No, bikes on the wall.
Oh, bikes on the wall. Yeah. Bikes. But plaques are soon to come. But yeah, I wanted to set up the environment so that it had a nice flow to it and so that it was ideal for getting work done. And more specifically, generating ideas, because that's what I think of myself as a creative. You're generating ideas. But in terms of hobbies, what I really went all in with these last couple of months was cooking. Just trying different recipes, trying some baking, trying healthy baking for the most part, trying to take recipes that I already like or food that I already like and try to make them a little bit healthier and fit into my lifestyle so they're easy to make, they taste good, and I can eat them, multiple times a week without getting bored of them. And that's been fun, man. I really enjoyed cooking and being in the kitchen more. And I've only eaten out in this whole time just a handful of times.
Yeah, that's a big thing I've realized is and that was mainly the reason why we were able to get these things like new couches and stuff like that is like I just stopped using things like Uber Eats and Deliveroo and all that stuff, and we were just cooking more and more and more because you got so much time. It's actually quite amazing. It's made cooking fun again. I'm intrigued though. What's sort of the top tier dish that you made? What's sort of been the favorite baking item?
So for the main course, I did some Japanese curry.
Oh wow!
It was really easy, really simple. I did all the basic stuff like banana bread, blondies, muffins, brownies, but all of them with kind of a healthier twist, like using Greek yogurt instead of like cream cheese. And a lot of this stuff turned out pretty good, man. Like the macros are good, it tastes good, still satisfies my sweet craving. But one of my favorite baked items was probably the brownies that I made.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. We didn't do too much baking at all, to be honest. I wish we'd done more. But although everyone's done banana bread, right?
Yeah,
and
that's a meme.
that is definitely a meme. And blondies are fucking underrated. You can actually get one from I don't know if you've ever had it, James, from Philippa's. They do like a blondie.
No, I haven't.
And they like Philippa's is not just like that Philippa's was like the original sourdough hipster bakery, but it was like a chain, and they would sort of do commercial baking as well, and you could buy that shit everywhere, particularly at IGAs, these sort of little independent grocers. Right, the next 6 months, what are you guys thinking about? What do you want to look at? What do you want to achieve? Where's your mindset around on that? Maybe we'll start with James.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, right now, because there is a lot of uncertainty still, I feel like there's more certainty than maybe there was a few months ago, but there's still a bit of uncertainty. So the way I'm thinking about like the next 6 months is I kind of just want to double down on my habits and just keep them strong, because that's something that's easy to let slip in this period. Like I was mentioning before, meditation, working out, getting stronger, keeping my diet up, all these kinds of things. Like in this sort of period, that's kind of my focus. I'm like, all right, we don't know what the next 6 months is going to look like in terms of what's possible. So I just want to just keep doing those small basic things every day, so that when we are back to normal, I'm in the best position to just execute hard,
What about you, Sunny?
Yeah, man, for me, I'm seeing this again as more of an opportunity to put my head down, focus, and work on stuff that's been working and build a foundation so that, and really build the foundation of this business so that when things open up again, I can enjoy that 100% without being in a position where I have to, still have my head down, still be grinding away. So I feel like we've got this time, whether we want it or not. And I just want to use it in the best way so that when this time period is over, I can look back at it with a sense of pride that I did what had to be done, and then be able to reap the fruits of my labor when everything returns back to normal.
I'd agree with that. I think we're all sort of getting to that position now. It's just a matter of when things start to open again and at what level. I just hope that things open again and we're lucky where we are and we don't have this supposed second wave that everyone's talking about. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. All right, rapid fire questions for both of you to finish things off. What have your morning and evening routines look like?
Morning routine. So been trying to sleep more, as I was saying before. So a lot of the times I don't have an alarm, which is very new to me. So I've just been letting my body wake up when it's ready. And that's the best feeling. Once you start doing that regularly, it's hard to go back to alarms. But so I've been waking up when I wake up. First thing I do is I meditate, which is something I've been doing a lot the past year. So continue to do that. I make a coffee. If it's sunny, I'll sit outside in the sun. If it's cold and not sunny, I'll just sit on the couch and read for about half an hour at least. Mm-hmm. Do a little bit of journaling, and then I spend some time in my body, go do a workout, and after that, get to work, and I'm ready to go.
What about you, Sunny?
Yeah, man, for me, same thing. No alarm clocks, no bedtimes. In the morning, I wake up first thing. I put the coffee on, and then I go into the bathroom and I use something called a neti pot. Wash my face. Use something called a neti pot, which is for me has been a game changer. Wakes me up. It improves my breath by a bunch. Puts me back in the zone. I just feel like $1,000,000 after I use the neti pot. It's one of the 7 yoga kind of traditions. I highly recommend people look into it. And then have my coffee. I review my to-do list that I got to do, which is something that I write the night before. It's usually 3 personal items, 3 business items, professional items. And then I make a plan of attack and see how I'm going to execute on those tasks. In the evening, I like to actually have the last 3 to 4 hours of the day to be a creative space where I, as funny as it sounds, I turn the lights down. I have the mood lighting set up in my apartment for productivity and focus, but in a very creative way. I have blue and red LEDs all over the place. It's a really interesting environment. Might light a candle, turn the rest of the lights really low, put some music on, and I'll smoke some weed, and I'll just sit in front of my computer and just create. And most of the times, it's whatever I'm creating is for my one of the brands that I'm working on, and I'll work at it for 3-4 hours. I get some of my best ideas done at that point, and then I'll also use a neti pot again at night. I sleep like a baby because I feel like those 4 hours are kind of a magic block of time for me, and they often reap some benefit. Right, there's something that comes out of that time that I'm really happy with, and then I sleep like a baby because I put in the work during the day, and right before bed, I'm doing something that I love, and I sleep like a baby, and I wake up feeling like $1,000,000.
Yeah, the neti pot thing, I think Fez is like the go-to brand here, but it's just like a plastic based thing. I know having nice sinuses. Growing up with painful sinuses as a kid, that shit was so useful. There's nothing better than having a shower as well and just like clearing your nose out. It's got to be up there with like taking a shit.
Man, you're right. It feels just as good. Literally like taking a shit out of your nose.
It is. James, what are you normally doing at night?
My nights are definitely not as structured or as productive. One thing, it's always on my list of things I know I should do is phone on airplane mode. It started off at 8, but then I never did that. So I moved it to 9, but then I never did that. So then I moved it to 10, and sometimes I turn it off at 10, but that's really the only thing I do. Sometimes I meditate just before bed. If I feel like I need to really wind down. But those are the two things. What
have the two of you been reading lately, book-wise, or listening to on Audible?
Yeah, I've been reading a few biographies, autobiographies of people, interesting people, because this is something me and Sunny have talked about before. Like a lot of books, especially the sort of, I guess, personal development sort of genre. I've read like hundreds of books or over 100 books in the past few years, and you kind of get the gist of what people are trying to say after a while.
It's much the same after a while.
Yeah. So I've been reading a lot more autobiographies of interesting people and trying to learn from what they've done. So, for example, I recently read the memoir of Robert Kwok, who's the founder of Shangri-La Hotels, Malaysian businessman. Really fascinating insight into that guy and, what it takes to kind of succeed in business in Asia, which I found very fascinating. I'm reading the autobiography of the founder of Patagonia at the moment. I forget his name, but interesting brand, interesting company. And it's kind of interesting as well to read those two sorts of books close to each other, because you look at someone like a Robert Kwok, who's like a hardcore capitalist businessman, versus the founder of Patagonia, who built this empire, but he was very much a reluctant businessman and was more interested in climbing and hiking and being in nature, and to see, I guess, like the different ways people approach problems. I like kind of mixing those ideas in my head.
What about you, Sunny?
Yeah, man, I haven't been reading too much lately, actually, like James touched on. We had this conversation. I just haven't read anything of note in the last year or so, but I have been digesting a lot of information through video. So I've been following a lot of Sam Ovens material lately.
Yeah.
He has some really cool videos, and he's gone into more of this long format video format, which I really loved listening to. And during this whole COVID thing, I've also started following a lot of investors, real estate investors, stock, cryptocurrency, just to see what each person's perspective is and input is on this situation. I wouldn't consider myself an investor, and that's not my strong area. And I've always been curious, which one, like, I'm of the opinion that, you can only really master a handful of things in your life, right? You can be okay at a bunch, but if you want to go into mastery, you can only do a handful. And so I'm trying to figure out, well, which one do I learn? Which one do I dive into the deepest? Is it stocks? Is it real estate? Is it crypto? What is it? Is it my business, which is another investment also, right? So I've been just following a lot of different people and digesting their content organically. And it's been awesome, because I've been taking a lot of notes of what they say, and then kind of like cross-referencing, well, this person's saying this and this person's saying that, and trying to come up with my own kind of logical game plan when it comes to investing based on all these signals that I'm hearing.
Yeah. I remember I went through that stage, like having been in the finance industry prior, like probably at 22. I remember actually at 22, like I blew $4,000 on trading oil futures. This is like in the very early days when I was training. It's a very good lesson because I read a book afterwards called "What I Learned Losing $1 Million," and it was a guy who was a registered broker at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, who is a commodities broker, and it's very hard to get that sort of. He was on the board as well at the CME. And the guy basically just made the argument that he was a lucky idiot on his way up, and that he had a huge loss which like ruined him personally, but he was able to recover from it. And the thing that he highlighted to me in that book was look at the people who are most consistent with their returns over the longest period of time. And I remember finding this recently. I just can't remember the name of the chart, but I think if you Google investors with greatest returns over time, and eventually if you just go on Google Images, you find it. And it's like a chart of the most well-known. Yeah, here it is. It's a chart of all the investors, and the plot is time, so track record, next to annual outperformance of the S&P 500. And it's really, really fucking interesting because it also maps them out by investing style. So they've got like a square, a circle, triangle, different symbols for different investing styles. And the thing that I came to realize was that the people which were at the end of the curve over the longest period of time with the most consistent returns were all value investors, or they're all disciples of value investing. So you think about people like Warren Buffett, Joel Greenblatt, Howard Marks. A lot of these people have done extremely well over a long period of time, and so I just followed that route. It was very interesting. But you're also talking about other things like real estate, so it's hard to map that stuff as well. All right, gents. I think we've just cracked over an hour. Thanks for doing this with me. First international guest, Sunny. Where can everyone find you on the interwebs and social?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan. Thanks for the opportunity again. Always good to connect. Best way to connect is probably Instagram. My handle's at jharris, which is JHARRISS, or you can go to my website, jamesharrisson.com. Harrisson has 2 R's and 2 S's, just to keep you on your toes.
Sunny?
Yeah, man. Again, I appreciate the opportunity too. This has been it's been good fun, and I'm looking forward to doing it again sometime soon, hopefully. And as far as reaching out to me on social, Instagram is probably the best. Also, my tag on Instagram is Sunny All Year. Sunny spelled SUNNY.
And you can find Bushido Code. I think it's linked on your profile as well, right?
Yeah. And if you're interested in going just to Bushido Code, it's bushido.code.
Beautiful.
On Instagram.
Gents, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Jordan. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for watching Uncommon and this week's episode. If you like it, smash that like button. If you want to keep up to date with what we're doing, please do subscribe. We would love that. We'd love to build this audience that we're growing here of uncommoners. If you want to keep up to date with audio, you can search for us on all of your good podcast apps. It's Uncommon or Uncommon Show. Will typically find us. For social, you want to see behind the scenes this amazing studio that I'm sitting in. Just search at Uncommon_show. And everything will be there, including our weekly promos. But look, thanks so much for stopping by. Until next time, thanks for watching.